The classic image of a Victorian detective usually involves a sharp silhouette cutting through dense fog, a trench coat pulled tight against the damp, and a magnifying glass held to the cobblestones. But in the 1820s, London was a rapidly expanding metropolis, and its surging population brought an overwhelming wave of violent, unsolved crime. There were no trench-coated geniuses pacing the alleys. Law enforcement consisted mostly of local night watchmen. They carried simple wooden nightsticks and lanterns, and their entire policing strategy relied heavily on stumbling across a crime while it was actively happening. The criminal underworld had developed sophisticated, coordinated networks, while the justice system was still hoping to get lucky and catch a thief mid-stride. If a murder occurred, the aftermath was pure chaos. Without any concept of a secured perimeter, curious neighbors and reporters simply walked right into the room, trampling over footprints and pocketing potential evidence before the authorities even arrived. When the coroner finally showed up, they rarely conducted a rigorous medical inspection. Instead, they asked around the neighborhood, using local gossip to guess how the person died. A smart killer could easily exploit this vulnerability. By planting a few well-timed rumors in the local pub, they could steer the coroner's verdict toward a convenient accident, or even frame a completely innocent neighbor. If a killer left no living witnesses and the locals had no juicy gossip to share, the investigation simply stopped. The authorities had no tools to force the environment to yield answers. Without a methodical way to gather facts, early Victorian London offered the ideal conditions for someone to execute a murder and walk away completely undetected. Scotland Yard finally recognized this blind spot in 1842. They assembled a specialized branch of just 8 men who operated entirely in plain civilian clothing. The public despised them. In an era that valued strict social transparency, officers working in disguise were considered deceitful and entirely ungentlemanly. Newspapers aggressively attacked the branch. They called these men slinkers in the shadows, arguing that a disguised officer was essentially a government spy, blurring the boundary between law enforcement and criminal behavior. Despite the backlash, these detectives stopped walking standard patrol routes. They began infiltrating organized gangs, tracking complex safe-cracking operations and elaborate con artists from the inside out. They also shifted the entire timeline of an investigation. Instead of trying to interrupt a crime, they arrived after the fact to observe the remaining clues and deduce what had happened logically. This small unit proved that careful, undercover observation yielded far better results than a uniformed guard simply hoping to spot trouble. Arriving after a crime had already happened presented a new obstacle. Detectives had to ensure the physical evidence left behind remained perfectly intact until they could systematically analyze it. They began physically barricading locations. By blocking the public and the press from entering, they preserved the exact state of the room, turning the space itself into a reliable witness. They also needed a reliable way to recognize repeat offenders. Relying on an individual officer's memory to spot a thief who had been arrested months prior was wildly inaccurate. The solution was the mugshot. By sitting suspects for standardized photographs, investigators created a visual catalog of the city's criminal element. To maximize efficiency, photographers placed a handheld mirror on the suspect's shoulder, capturing their straight-on face and side profile in a single exposure. Combining protected crime scenes with permanent photographic records gave investigators a reliable memory bank that couldn't be altered by rumors or faded recollection. Still, investigators faced one massive vulnerability: murder weapons that worked completely from the inside, leaving zero external marks on the victim. Arsenic was the weapon of choice. It was incredibly cheap, readily available as rat poison, and because it was completely tasteless, a killer could simply stir it into a victim's tea. It became so common in domestic murders, usually carried out by spouses or relatives looking to secure a quick payout, that it earned the dark nickname the inheritance powder. To catch an arsenic poisoner, detectives had to look inside the body. This necessity drove the development of the forensic autopsy, transitioning death investigations from casual observation to rigorous internal inspection. In 1836, an English chemist named James Marsh developed a reliable chemical test. By treating stomach contents with acid and zinc, his method could detect microscopic, previously invisible traces of arsenic in human tissue. The Marsh test meant a killer could no longer rely on a poison's invisibility. The physical chemistry of the corpse provided undeniable proof of the crime. The criminal underground soon realized that stealth and secrecy were no longer guaranteed shields against the law. A modern investigative framework was now active, built on 4 sturdy pillars: plainclothes surveillance, protected crime scenes, standardized photographic records, and chemical toxicology. Neighborhood gossip and loose rumors were entirely replaced by methodical data collection and objective physical proof. By learning to read footprints, photographs, and stomach chemistry, Victorian investigators proved that dead men do, in fact, tell tales.